Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 1993's Mega Man X, the reinvention of the classic run-and-gun formula with a few new wall and dash tricks, as well as a hard rock attitude to the soundtrack.
After that, it's the Super Nintendo sequel that helped perfect a genre and brought one of gaming's first major female protagonists into the spotlight she deserved, 1994's Super Metroid.
So yes, plenty of possible themes for this one. They could be characters with arm cannons. Not only that, they're on the Super Nintendo. They're very influential games. But I think the first one we came up with in general was, the composers we're going to talk about this week both have the last name of Yamamoto.
Which was not planned in advance, I might add. Which is really funny to me, and what a coincidence.
It just so happened to work out that way. Wanted to give a shout out before we get going here to Matis_Kosa on Twitter. Last week, we talked about a song from Castlevania, Heart of Fire. And it had this da-da-da-da-da, like kind of just like this back and forth alternating sound to it.
And I thought they were arpeggios, though neither of us were really sure if that's actually what they were, and we asked if anybody did know, that they let us know.
So Matt just said, quote, "The music theory term for the concept you discussed in Heart of Fire is known as hocket. It is common in Baroque and classical period music with composers like Bach and Mozart, and it is used to give the illusion of multiple lines in a single line of music." Definition from Google says, quote, "A spasmodic or interrupted effect in medieval and contemporary music, produced by dividing a melody between two parts, notes in one part coinciding with rests in the other." So, thank you very much, Mattis. That is a big, big help there.
Yeah, I had no idea of that term before now, and it's very cool to know.
Let's keep things rolling with some composer follow-up headlines. First couple stories here are kind of, I guess, maybe speculating things to keep an eye on here in the future. First off, Sabotage, the studio behind The Messenger, which we've talked about on the show before, they announced that they're going to reveal a new game on March 19th. Just wondering if this could be a project that Rainbow Dragon Eyes will be attached to, just like he did with The Messenger. With Thierry Boulanger being the big fan and all that, does he bring him back? I would imagine he does. Just keep an eye, March 19th for a new game reveal there.
Here's hoping, because he did a really good job on The Messenger. Also, yesterday, at time of release, was the reveal of a new game from the designer of Minute. We don't know what it is, because this is being recorded a week in advance. But, we're wondering what could it be? Is Jukio Kallio attached to the project, or is it a different composer? We don't know. You probably know, listening.
Yeah, you may know right now, so just keep that in mind. Go search that out. See if he is attached there to that new project that Devolver is publishing. Platinum Games' YouTube channel now features an interview with Hiroshi Yamaguchi. We talked about him last week for Bayonetta, but he's also the composer for The Wonderful 101, and that's relevant because they're rounding out their Kickstarter for the remastered version. So if you're interested in an interview like that, go check out Platinum Games' YouTube channel.
Also, in addition, Bear McCreary composed for the film Fantasy Island, which I keep seeing ads for on Instagram. And the score is getting some notable acclaim, so that might be a movie to look into. At the very least, a score to look into.
It's a movie where it's like, these young people are going to this island for possible sexy times. But their fantasies get perverted and twisted, and it becomes like a horror film.
That's what I've been able to tell, too.
So if that's your kind of thing, check it out. Bear McCreary. Always good to support that score, I guess. And then Joe, just remind you need to go to that PAX East concert.
Oh yeah. I am planning to fight tooth and nail to make sure I get a seat at that concert. And if you are there as well, and you see me, I'm shy, but also, I don't know, say hello.
So yeah, Darren Korb, Ashley Barrett, the 10-year anniversary of Supergiant continuing their tour. I saw a video clip from their show in London, where it's like the crowd was singing along to with Build That Wall.
And it was like awesome.
It was really cool. It was on Ashley Barrett's Instagram, so definitely check that out.
I think of everything, that is the thing I'm most excited for in going to PAX.
I don't blame you, to be honest. So let's start this week with talking about our first game, Mega Man X. Now, the game is known over in Japan as Rockman X, which makes sense. Mega Man, Rockman over there. And Rockman X was the first Mega Man game to be developed for the Super Famicom, the Super Nintendo, following the original series of Rockman games on the NES, the Famicom. Now, at the time of Rockman X's release in Japan, Rockman 6 was out on the NES, but the West was still a few months away from Mega Man 6's release. So bear that in mind, that this is an NES game in North America in 1994, being Mega Man 6. Crazy to think about the longevity of the NES. But it was Mega Man X that really allowed, a footing for Mega Man games on Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, all around the world there. Rockman X released in Japan on December 17th, 1993 for Super Famicom. January 1994 was the closest release date I could find for North America on Super Nintendo. May 1st, 1994 in Europe for Mega Man X. Since then, Mega Man X has been ported so many times to so many different platforms, it's not worth talking about, like the PC, the mobile version, every single collection, like on PS2. There is a remake of note, though, and it was for PSP of all platforms. And it's called Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, released in North America in 2006, and it's not very good, unfortunately. But where is the best place you can play Mega Man X today? If you have a Super Nintendo Classic from Nintendo, it's on there. But it is available today as part of Mega Man X Legacy Collection, which was released on July 24th, 2018 on all major platforms, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Mega Man X, developed by Capcom and published by Capcom, though Nintendo published the game in Europe, interestingly enough. Mega Man X is a 2D platform adventure game. If you have seen a Mega Man game, you're generally very familiar with that run and gun kind of gameplay, jumping to platforms, shooting at enemies. But Mega Man X adds a few new skills. So players can scale, slide down, or jump off nearly any wall. They can also collect armor pieces scattered throughout the different levels that improve X's health, his defense, and even can provide a dash ability. If you really want to know the differences between Mega Man X and the original Mega Man, there's that famous sequelitis video made by Egoraptor on YouTube. Check that out if you have not seen that already, though I'm sure many of you listening have. So the plot of Mega Man X. The year is 21XX, so it's about 100 years after the original Mega Man games. In this futuristic world, there are replicate androids, or Reploids, that exist. They're basically robots with human emotions, and they've been given free will that humans have. So that means that certain Reploids can choose to take part in crime, so they wish. And as a result, these Reploids that kind of deviate from being the good, upstanding citizens, they're dubbed Mavericks by the public at large. So as a result, an elite police force is established. This task force is known as Maverick Hunters. And so this is where we meet our protagonist, Mega Man X, who is a Reploid, that's a Maverick hunter, and he's assigned to stop a Maverick attack on a local highway. Here, X encounters Vile, who is a henchman for the Maverick leader, Sigma. He'll also join forces with the combat-savvy hunter named Zero. Can Mega Man X stop Sigma's Mavericks and ultimately put an end to Sigma's nefarious plans? Joe, this is where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Mega Man X?
Next to nothing. I've played the intro level, and that's it. It is on the list for, like, possible bonus episodes for Smash Pieces. But when that would happen, I do not know. Obviously, I am familiar with Mega Man X because, again, like we said earlier, it is among the most influential games on the entire SNES. And I've certainly seen a good amount of it. I've certainly heard the soundtrack quite a bit. But yeah, I've never really dove in and played it. I've never played any Mega Man spin-offs. I've only played the core games. It's weird.
Yeah, I feel like that's the case with me too. I adore this soundtrack. I feel like I know it inside and out. But I am really bad at the game. Like, I have tried a few times and couldn't really get into it. And now, since then, I have beaten Mega Man 2 and 11. So I feel like I could give it a fair shake again. But yeah, I just don't have that much game experience. It's a game I actually do love to watch when speedruns go on for the GDQ marathons. When people do like either solo Mega Man X runs or more often than not, it's races. Fascinating to watch. Love watching Mega Man X speedruns. And I wish I could be that good, but I'm not.
Yeah, I have that feeling about a lot of games, honestly. What would honestly change it for me and what I would recommend is how I finally ended up beating Mega Man 2. I don't know if the Switch version has it, but Mega Man, the X Legacy Collection that you mentioned earlier, if it is anything like the regular Legacy Collection, it should have a rewind. And rewind makes those games a lot less frustrating for people like you and me who are, let's say, challenged at older games. So that's honestly, I've thought about picking that up a couple of times. It's on my Switch wish list. I want to check to make sure it has rewind first, but I mean, even if it doesn't, these games are supposed to be all super good. So, I mean, I'll probably still get it at some point, but yeah, rewind helps a lot.
So yeah, there's a variety of ways to play the original Mega Man X, but its development history is a little interesting, I think. First of all, learning that Super Rockman was the original planned title for the game. Now, Rockman X was in the early consideration, but ultimately, yeah, that was used as the final title. Now, when Rockman Mega Man X became that title, I guess apparently some game journalists mistook this as 10, like Mega Man 10, which, like, how? You were at like Mega Man 5 and 6 at the time. This wasn't like a pre-Windows situation where we're skipping numbers.
You just skip 7, 8, 9, and those numbers aren't important.
There's like a joke in there somewhere, I'm sure, but
why is Mega Man called Mega Man X? Because 7, 8, 9.
So apparently when he was approached with the idea of creating Rockman for the Super Famicom, planner Keiji Inafune stated, and I should point out, you mentioned Shmuplations last week for Castlevania. Came in very handy for Rockman X here. So Keiji Inafune said, quote, "In the Capcom consumer division, the Rockman series was the most dreaded of the 3 instant death series, along with Ghosts and Goblins and any Disney game. If you were assigned it, you could kiss your freedom goodbye. And now it had come to me. You can do it, I tried to tell myself. And if it goes well, you'll reap all the accolades. Besides, the company pays for meals when you work overtime. And this was especially enticing to Inafune because he said he had only about 3,000 yen left in his bank account at the time. If you want to do the rough translation, moving the couple decimal points back, that's about $30 for the United States. So, yeah, he took it, and the dev team went through hell. It was apparently a brutal development cycle, especially during crunch at the end. This is all according to a dev diary that was translated by Shmuplations. One report even said that the wall dash ability was inspired by kicking a wall in frustration. Like doing that and then think, wait, you can kick off the wall. I'm a genius! So this may be hyperbole.
I'm going to assume it is.
But I have found the storytelling interesting. After you play this intro stage that Joe and I either seem to just barely get past or struggle on, respectively, you are presented with a character select screen with these 8 Mavericks. And these Mavericks are not like the robot masters of original Mega Man lore where it's like adjective man, adjective man, adjective man. It's like a description followed by the animal that it's closely resembling in robot form, which is pretty neat. If you follow IGN's guide of recommending which order you want to kill the bosses in, to take advantage of their weaknesses with the weapons that the bosses give you, IGN recommends Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Armored Armadillo, Launch Octopus, Boomer Kawanger, Sting Chameleon, Storm Eagle, and Flame Mammoth. Now, when you're playing this game, I don't think there's necessarily a traditional save system in the original version because they have a password system that allows for continued player progression between play sessions. And there's also the neat little ability that completing some stages first will subtly affect the landscape of some others. An example being if you clear Storm Eagle's aircraft carrier stage, that will cause electrical outages in Spark Mandrill's power plant stage. Or another one that people point out is that Flame Mammoth stage is supposed to have lava in it, but because most people start with Chill Penguin, that lava's been freezed over. So, little interesting things like that depending on what order you play the stages in. And then you have to go back because you'll get abilities that if you want to get all the armor pieces, you have to kind of do some backtracking and do all that to do a whole full 100% completion. Apparently, according to Inafune, Zero was originally intended to be the protagonist of these games because Inafune really wanted to make an entirely new Mega Man. But this was scaled back because of concerns about fan backlash. And if X does get that 100% completion, you go to a certain area, I think it's an Armored Armadillo stage, where you get a capsule with Dr. Light there, and he presents X with the Hadoken. And I think it's at, full health, quarter circle forward, X shoots out the Street Fighter famous Hadoken, and it's a one-shot instant kill on any enemy. Kind of amazing.
Which has always been kind of weird to me I don't know why that's weird, because they're both Capcom, perfectly natural, but for some reason, it's just odd to me.
And then, Shoryuken is in X2. It's just fascinating overall. But Mega Man X was reviewed very well at the time. Metacritic, not really a thing for games that old, but I guess Game Rankings is a thing for the SNES version, apparently at 88.5%. It has been praised as a near-perfect cart with classic gameplay, excellent graphics and sound, and tons of hidden items and power-ups. But I guess some of the criticisms are that it's too easy and too short, which makes Joe and I look at it and we're just like, oh, well, crap.
I mean, to be fair, the little I have played, it is certainly easier than classic Mega Man.
Sure.
That doesn't make it brain dead easy, but it It's definitely easier than classic Mega Man for sure.
Overall, though, Mega Man X is recognized as one of the top 10 to 15 SNES games of all time by most outlets. Some even think higher than that. And then plenty of sequels were spawned for it, up to Mega Man X8, which was released in March 2005 in North America for PS2 and PC. There was another series, Mega Man Zero, that takes place another century, even a century after the X storyline. Now, I'm talking about Mega Man X today because Mega Man 0/ZX Legacy Collection is now out today on all major platforms. So I'm going to talk some Mega Man, and my gosh, I love this soundtrack so much. Also, another fun little thing of how X has kind of carried on his lineage. Mega Man X, finally a playable character in the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Unfortunately, it was with Infinite, so that's a shame. And then he also appears in Super Smash Bros., but only as a Mii costume.
And then Zero, on the other hand, has gotten to be in everything.
More or less, yeah. People love Zero. They love X too, but as far as appearing in things, yeah, Zero was in MVC3. Yeah, so, and then all sorts of things there. So I do mention how I love this soundtrack, especially for like a 16-bit era game. The composer I'd like to highlight for this soundtrack is Setsuo Yamamoto. Setsuo Yamamoto, born September 17th, 1971, in Itami, Hyogo Prefecture in Japan. He joined Capcom in 1992. But apparently at the time he was not aware of their big game hits like Street Fighter or Rockman. He composed titles for a long time, but then since 2003, Yamamoto has adopted more of an executive role or supportive roles in the company, primarily as a manager of the mixing/sound studio, Bitmaster Studio. Early works, we talk about how, especially back in those days, composers were given aliases to kind of protect their identity in fear of poaching. So different early works credit him as Setsuo, Kashira, or Purple. Though as of 2013, he has also adopted an alias, Mr. X.
So he's the one that chased me in Raccoon City.
Yes, he is the tyrant. His favorite artist, he says, is the original Prince, and his favorite album is Lovesexy. So when we're talking about what he composed at Capcom, as far as games that have him as music or music composition credits, there's Final Fight 2, Aladdin, Mega Man X, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, Street Fighter Alpha, Mega Man The Power Battle, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Mega Man 2 The Power Fighters, Pocket Fighter, Rival Schools, Strider 2, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. A lot of people like to point out, seemingly, like, aside from Mega Man X, that like Strider 2 is apparently one that is a soundtrack of note from him.
I've heard a lot of good things about both soundtracks from the Strider series, honestly. But I've never played any of them, so I really can't say for sure.
But since he's become that executive role, he has a ton of games where he's like, special thanks, or in more recent game cases, he still works with Capcom through this Bitmaster Studio as a sound studio manager or coordinator, even games as recently as Monster Hunter World and that Resident Evil 2 remake. So he's still involved with Capcom games, just in a different, more supportive capacity. When it comes to Mega Man X's development, as far as the soundtrack itself, there are also compositions on the soundtrack, not only by Setsuo Yamamoto, who went by Setsuo as his alias. There's also compositions by Toshihiko Horiyama, who goes by Kiri, Kirry, and he composed the music for Mega Man X4. Yuki Iwai goes by Sato, composed the music for Mega Man X2. Yuko Takahara goes by Yuko. And Makoto Tomozawa, who goes by Tomozo, Tomozou. This is apparently known as Capcom's Alf Lyla group. Now, Yamamoto tried to play the original Mega Man games as research in preparation for Rockman X, and he struggled with them.
Thanks, me too.
I don't blame him at all for that. But then he was approached, according to this Deb diary, by T-san, who I'm assuming is a higher up, possibly producer Tokuro Fujiwara. And Fujiwara, or T-san, or whoever it was, said, "It's Rockman, but it's not Rockman." And so Yamamoto said, "My mind nearly short-circuited. Rockman and I had only just become friends. I was only just getting to know his world. Impossible. But my mind went on working until at last I hit upon it. He's a badass?" So I guess, is trying to take like these catchy melodies that Mega Man soundtracks are known for, but really just turn it up that much more because the game is in the future. X's abilities are much more than the original Mega Man's. So with Yamamoto style, bringing like these guitars into this mix, it's really a fantastic soundtrack and really a shining example of what's possible at that time on that Super Nintendo, that Super Famicom sound chip. So let's get to the 5 critical tracks, and we'll start with that opening stage, Central Highway. So this song has been more recently referred to as Central Highway, but oftentimes it is referred to as opening stage. Not the most creative name, but fine. At the same time, though, I mean, can you name a more hype intro stage theme? Like, this one really, really gets you in that right mood and gets you going.
I would agree. This is very indicative, I think, of the whole soundtrack, because it all kind of has this feeling to it almost. I don't know if that makes sense, what I just said, but it did in my brain, and that's all that matters. And yeah, if you know one song from Mega Man X, it's probably this one.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah. And it helps because it is the first thing you hear. Like, there's not even an intro to the game. It's you hit start and you're in the stage.
Yeah.
So this is legitimately the first thing you hear when you start a new game.
And it's amazing. It's this quintessential 16-bit rock. Like, all the instruments sound great for the time, and it really gets you going. Yamamoto apparently came up with the melody to this while riding his bicycle along the banks of Yodokawa and seeing the sunset in the distance. So, da-da-da-da-da. Just think of just wailing away on that guitar. Really, really cool stuff. But to continue the Critical 5, number 2 here, we're going to get into some of the Maverick stages here. One of these being Chill Penguin. This one is composed by Yuki Iwai. I sometimes like looking at, like, I guess the early English translations of this soundtrack and the different tracks. And for Chill Penguin, like, I guess it's sometimes referred to as Icy Penguigo, which is always just the funniest to see some of those names.
Yeah, so I went through and was listening on Spotify, and they're all the translations, the bad translations.
Yep.
and they're so good.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the better names there. But I also really like this song. Like, I think it just makes you think of Ice. Those higher pitched arpeggios, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like up and down and up and down. This kind of Ice feeling, I think it puts it right up there with like Ice Cap from Sonic 3, Phendrana Drifts from Metroid Prime, Free ZZ Peak from Banjo-Kazooie is like in that echelon of like the better wintry level themes out there.
See, I agree with you on Ice Cap and Phendrana Drifts, but Free ZZ Peak is weirdly enough in a different category in my mind, where it's like it's a Christmassy piece, and it's like one of the 5 in video games. But yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I think I'd still put Ice Cap Zone above this, because that song is just, it's so good.
Yes, yes.
But this song is incredibly good, yes.
Number 3 on the Critical 5, we're going to go with Spark Mandrill. This one composed by Makoto Tomozawa. Probably my favorite of the game, to be honest. Like, it just gets right into it with that electric guitar. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Like, the groove with the bass and percussion just just really keeping up the pace. And, like, you're just in it immediately. Like, there's no build up or anything like that. It's just right in your face, which is really good because it just has that energy and just keeps going. Yeah, my favorite from the soundtrack. I love Spark Mandrill theme.
I think it's up there for me. It's the riffs absolutely just like that. I'm pretty sure this and one other song was stuck in my head for the past like 3 days, and I couldn't remember what they were until I had refreshed my memory. I think I remember them specifically because of Smooth McGroove covers.
Possible, yeah.
I think, or at least when I'm hearing them in my head, I'm hearing them in his voice, regardless of whether or not he actually covered them or not. And I'm pretty sure Spark Mandrill was one of them.
For sure, like that's a really good cover of his. Yeah, just so many good riffs. Like it's, oh my gosh, so many great riffs for sure. But there's also a couple others that really come to mind as far as songs we got to talk about in a Mega Man X Critical 5. Another one, number 4 on the list here, Boomer Koanger. This one is composed by Yuko Takehara. Not only is Koanger fun to say, that's a great word, but this song is really an earworm because of these accents that happen in the song. And just right away, it's hit, 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 hit. Like it has these added sounds to these hits that I just feel like I haven't heard in like any other Super Nintendo song, or at least ones I can't really remember. But like the impact on these, like it's really, really memorable. It also goes through several melodies, and I think it just gives this song an overall impression of depth. It's not like repeating one thing over and over again. Like it's moving and going places for a SNES song.
I think this is probably my favorite on the Critical 5. Because, so like, for anybody wondering, like me, where I just spent the entire time that Peter talked about the song, Googling what a kuenger is, because I realized I hadn't done that. Which, by the way, if you just Google the word kuenger, all Mega Man X, every result. You have to search kuenger animal to even get what it is, which it's a kind of beetle. And I think that knowing that it is a type of bug actually kind of makes this song even better, because those little notes that you're talking about, they're small because it's a bug. Which I think really, really like enhances the effect that the song has. I don't know. I really, really like this song. It's incredibly catchy and it just feels high energy to listen to. I like it a lot.
Number 5 on the Critical 5, though. This is Storm Eagle. Just give me that riff like all the time. It's so good. And I realized while listening to it, it's like, oh, I could just hear this loop endlessly and like I'd be good with it. So good. Storm Eagle, composed by Makoto Tomozawa. Joe, I know we've talked in the past before and you don't like this song.
I don't mind it. This is the other one, by the way. This is the one that was stuck in my head from Smooth. Like, I don't hear the regular version of the song when it's playing in my brain. I hear Smooth McGroove. It's bizarre. I've warmed up to this song over the long while. I think I like Smooth McGroove's version of it, though, better than the sound font that Mega Man X comes out of this. But I do like the dun 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 dun. I think that's my favorite part.
So good. But if you notice, it has like these really hypersonic frequency notes that play throughout it. And I guess if you're younger, like maybe it's more annoying or bothersome to you. But I know it's there. Maybe you haven't, if you're listening at home, you haven't heard it before. But like go back and listen. Like there's some really, really high-pitched notes there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's all about that guitar riff. It's just so cool. Tracks on the cutting room floor. You have a couple, Joe. Let me hear them.
Well, the first one I have is because I forgot. I mainly put this one on. Well, I'll get to it, I guess. It's Sting Chameleon. I mainly put this one on the list because in my head I was like, oh, well, this is the only boss that isn't mentioned on either cutting room floor and on the Critical 5. So, I mean, I should put it on here anyways, because, kids, I forgot that Launcher Octopus even exists. Granted, this is also just a really good song, and I am pretty jazzed about it, so, hey, it all worked out.
Yeah, this was one that I feel like should at least be on the cutting room floor. Definitely should be mentioned there. But so I'm glad you covered it.
I can't believe I forgot about an entire boss. It wasn't until I was like, wait, that only equals 7. There's 8 bosses in this game. Who am I forgetting? I had to go look it up, guys. And my other song on the cutting room floor is Sigma Stage 2. Last week, when we talked about Castlevania, during the conversation about the song Wicked Child, you happened to point out that some parts of that song have a very Mega Man feeling to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this song is returning the favor because, I don't know about you, but when I listen to this song, it sounds super Castlevania-like.
Yeah, it doesn't sound a whole lot like Mega Man.
Yeah, it sounds like it belongs in a Castlevania game. It's kind of jarring, but also it sounds really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good pick. And there's so many others that we could mention, like even if it's just like the character select theme of the da da ba da da ba da ba da, like it's simple little loops like that. Like yeah, they'd be great. But I've got a couple bosses here on my cutting room floor. First off, let's go Armored Armadillo. This one was so hard to cut. So difficult. But because, man, that intro is just a classic. Like, da-da-da-da-da, like, gets you right into it. Oh, my goodness. And shout out to Screw Attack's side scrollers. If that means anything to you, congrats, you are old on the internet like me. the podcast on oldscrewattack.com that they use this as their intro theme, and man, I miss it.
I kind of just like how jazzy this song is, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It's very good.
Oh yeah, it just goes when it really gets in the main electric guitar melody, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 on my cutting room floor here is Flame Mammoth. There are just so many good electric guitar riffs in this one. Yamamoto did a great job. Some people think that like this is their favorite, and I don't blame them. But at the same point, if like you're playing through that normal level run, you're hearing this one last, and you've heard a selection of great tunes leading up to it, and this is just another great song. But I feel like it doesn't make the same sort of impact if you play through that order. So what will I never forget about Mega Man X? Not a lot about playing the game, obviously, because I don't have much of experience with that. But I think this is a top 5 Super Nintendo soundtrack. And I say top 5 because, like, in my heart, and like, as someone who's a guitar player, I'm like, I love this. I want to put it number 1, but I can't put it above Chrono Trigger. Let's be honest. Like, Chrono Trigger isn't going to be beat as far as the Super Nintendo soundtrack, but I'll give it top 5. Mega Man X is like top 5 easily. If you want to put it at 2, if you want to put it at 5, anywhere in between, I'm good with it. But it's definitely there. And this soundtrack is what I'll never forget.
I think I would agree with that. I think that I have 1 or 2 games I'd probably place above it. But I do think it would be in the top 5 for sure.
So to transition to our next game, we like to cover a fan remix, fan cover, whether it's on OC Remix, on YouTube, what have you. I was introduced to Mega Man X's soundtrack through, I think of all places, Family Jewels did a Mega Man X medley, and that's where I went from like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with some songs, to like really loving the Mega Man X soundtrack. But we've talked about Family Jewels plenty.
We had him as the transition last week.
Exactly. So like we gotta bring up someone else. So Dominic Ninmark on YouTube has a song called The One and Only, and it's a version of Central Highway, but I think a little more Genesis-y like sounds in the sound font, if you will. I really like how it sounds. So please listen, please enjoy, and we'll be right back.
right, it's time to... Well, usually I'd say change gears, but honestly, if you really think about it, we're not changing all that much. In terms of gears, same console, very similar player characters, though different gameplay flows in general and different atmosphere when it comes to both the actual game and the soundtrack itself, because I am talking about Super Metroid, which was originally released on March 14th, 1994 for the Super Famicom in Japan, with a release for the Super Nintendo following in the West the same year, being April 18th for North America and July 28th for the PAL regions. It was developed by Nintendo R&D 1 with Intelligent Systems handling most of the programming, which I didn't know, and it was published by Nintendo, obviously. It is a 2D action-adventure platformer that is now considered the founder of what we call the Metroidvania genre. Again, 2 weeks in a row, we have mentioned Castlevania Symphony of the Night on the show already, which was the other half of the founding duo of this genre, but Super Metroid is generally considered to have basically invented the formula.
So it's basically, for those that aren't aware of what Metroidvania is, it's when there's a map of different rooms, hallways, what have you, and the player is trying to progress through this map, but generally learns certain abilities along the way that makes traversal easier. Like early on in your map traversal, you may see different power-ups hidden away, and it's like, oh, but I can't get there. It means you have to progress, get abilities, and then come backtrack to help with completion. Like that's, I think, in a gist of it, what Metroidvania is. And then you have enemies kind of scattered along the way. So as you're doing all this platforming and jumping and traversal, you encounter enemies and kill them along the way.
Yeah, like, for example, to give a specifically Metroid example, in order to open doors in Super Metroid, you have to shoot them. And some of those doors require missiles instead of the regular gun. And obviously, you can't get into those doors until you gain access to missiles. And then once you do that, well, suddenly a bunch of other doors are open. And there are doors that require even more than that. There are areas that without items like the grapple beam, you just can't traverse through. And it's sort of built around that sort of idea that you are collecting the ability to go to the entire map little by little. So, Super Metroid is technically actually Metroid 3, as it is a direct sequel to the Game Boy title Metroid 2: Return of Samus. In Super Metroid, you play as the intergalactic bounty hunter Samus Aran. During the ending of Metroid 2, she found herself having exterminated all but one of the dangerous parasitic creatures known as Metroids. The one remaining Metroid is a baby, or the baby, as some might call it, that hatched in front of and imprinted on Samus herself. This Metroid has been given to a colony of scientists in order to study it, because they believe that the Metroid has energy-producing capabilities that might be beneficial to mankind. However, this doesn't last very long. As Samus is leaving the facility after dropping off the Metroid, suddenly she gets a distress signal from the very facility she just left. And so she turns around and heads on back, only to find that the space pirates and their leader, well, one of their leaders, sort of, not really the one highest leader, but he's up there, the dragon-like creature, Ridley, is attacking the base and attempting to steal the baby Metroid. And you try to stop him, but Samus is unsuccessful and thus has to follow Ridley and his men back to their hideout on the hazardous planet Zebes, which is the planet that the first Metroid takes place on. So, as Samus, you must navigate your way through the various sections of Zebes and retrieve the Metroid before the space pirates figure out how to produce more Metroids for themselves. With that being said, we've basically already discussed the gameplay. It is a Metroidvania platformer that kind of thing. So this is where I would say, hey, what are your experiences with Super Metroid?
I played it for the first time probably 2 or 3 years ago. I actually just recently came across on Facebook Memories or whatever. It's like, oh, and I beat it and it took me like 9 hours and I probably had like high 60% completion. It really made me think because my first Metroid game was Metroid Prime, which it's then very different to go back to a classic like Super Metroid. And if you don't have that kind of 2D side-scrolling game knowledge growing up, it makes it a little difficult. But fortunately, Super Metroid is a bona fide classic, and it really holds up well today. It's a game that I think anyone can go back and play and enjoy. It may take a little bit to get used to like the diagonal aiming, especially with things like grapple hook swinging, and my goodness, the wall jumping is horrendous. But I think it's a wonderful game. I really enjoyed my time playing it and beating it.
Yeah, I played it for the first time last year for Smasterpieces. A lot of people were weirdly excited to see me play this game for the first time. There were our friends like set up bingo cards and everything. Like a bingo card, I guess. There was a bingo card about my playthrough. I also very much enjoyed my time. According to my Smasterpieces personal spreadsheet where I do track how long each game has been going, I took about 11 hours to get through it. I think 3 sessions is how long it took me. But it is a genuinely fantastic game that I liked way more than I expected to like, to be perfectly honest. And I do think that at some point, it's probably a game I'd go back and play again. Which is weird, because I don't get that feeling very often. It was my first, well, it was my second Metroid game, but my first is the one that you're not supposed to mention ever. Back when it first came out. So we'll leave that nameless so that I'm not attacked.
The baby.
The baby. So let's talk about the development of Super Metroid. Unfortunately, not a lot of information on it, which is shocking, actually, considering how majorly influential the this game has been on all video games. So, Super Metroid opens with a very famous narration. Being, Peter, if you would do the honors.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Perfect. This narration is apparently provided by Dan Ausen, a localizer/translator who worked at Nintendo of America at the time, and we have actually mentioned him before on this very show, because he was the guy who translated 10% of Earthbound before having to hand the project off to somebody else. So, there's a connection there to previous episodes. The idea for a full console Metroid was apparently not exactly an idea that was pounced on as soon as possible, it seems. The previous console title had actually been the original Metroid on the NES, which released in 1986, meaning it took a full 8 years before Super Metroid would see store shelves. Now, according to director Yoshio Sakamoto, it actually took Nintendo half a year to approve the project, which seems like a lot, but I don't know how long it generally takes Nintendo to approve anything. But from there, it took 2 years for the team of 15 people to develop.
15 people?
15 people.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it's always so weird to look back at these really iconic games and be like, all right, those were made at a time when teams were relative. Like, 15 was a big team for back then, I feel like. I don't know. Weird. When asked about why it took so long for Samus to make a return to a console, Sakamoto said, "We wanted to wait until a true action game was needed, and also to set the stage for the reappearance of Samus Aran." Speaking of an action game, though, this was apparently their first priority. Like, number one with a bullet, they wanted to make a good action game. And the biggest way they achieved this, in their opinion, is by letting Samus fire in every direction while moving.
Yep.
So I believe in the original she can shoot up and forward. I don't think she can shoot down in this one either, can she? Yes, she can. She can shoot down in this one.
Yeah.
So the way the game does this is, because it was a SNES, it didn't have diagonal controls traditionally, basically. You can aim in the 4 cardinal directions, up, down, left, right. But then hitting the R and L buttons allow you to aim diagonally up or diagonally down. And this is incredibly useful and much different than how a lot of other games did it at the time. It is also one of the first games to feature an auto map system, which would outline rooms and show important locations on the map as you explored the planet Zebes. This was another addition meant to make it more action-focused, I assume, to make it so that you spent less time worrying about the map and more time doing the thing that got you through the map. Shortly before this game's release, actually, the ESRB, or Entertainment Software Ratings Board, was formed in North America. And some were worried that this might affect the game's release, because, I mean, you were playing as a character in armor shooting stuff. And when asked if it might be a problem, Sakamoto apparently claimed it would be fine because Samus is fighting to maintain peace in the galaxy. Quote, "It's not violence for the sake of violence."
Yeah, nowhere close to something like Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, like, you gotta remember, for kids that aren't aware, the ESRB was specifically made in response to Mortal Kombat, and Super Metroid is a far cry from that. I mean, to be fair, Mortal Kombat back then was nowhere near as bad as it is today, even. So that should give you a little bit of context for what gaming was like back then. I think Night Trap also had something to do with the ESRB, but it was mostly in response to Mortal Kombat. So upon release, Super Metroid was received incredibly well, with review aggregator Game Rankings coming up once more, putting it at 97%.
Woo. Yeah, I don't blame it.
Might be the highest we've seen a game rated, because I don't think Chrono Trigger mentioned Game Rankings, or if it did, I don't think I mentioned it, because I don't remember that number. But I think that might make this one of the highest rated games we've talked about.
Yeah, maybe.
From there, it has gone on to be often named one of the greatest games ever made. Pretty much, if you see a list of these are the best games that have ever been made in the history of video games, 9 times out of 10, Super Metroid is going to be on that list. One review from a British publication called Superplay even had the reviewer specifically note that it was a better game than his favorite game, Mega Man X.
Oh, just nipped it.
So, the instant I read that, I was like, oh, well, that has to go in the episode. Despite this, Super Metroid actually didn't sell very well in Japan. But when it came over to North America, it got a very strong marketing push that helped it do a lot better, with Nintendo reporting that as of 2003, the game had shipped almost 1.5 million copies of Super Metroid worldwide. Which seems kinda low for a game this, incredibly influential, but also, as we'll say in a bit, this game didn't get re-released very often on other systems until fairly recently.
It was also a different era. You had some Megaton games pulling huge numbers, but yeah, gaming is different then than it is now.
But it's also a game that became super popular with the speedrunning community. Super Metroid offers 3 different endings depending on how fast you complete the game. And by endings, I mean like it's a different picture at the end, whether or not Samus is wearing her armor or not. That's basically it. But this alone led to an uptick of people trying to figure out just how to beat the game as fast as possible. And even today, it is still played as the traditional finale to speedrunning events like AGDQ or SGDQ or any of those same ones, with its infamous kill the animals, save the frames, or save the animals, which is usually a bidding war that happens throughout the entire event. So until last year, I didn't know what the hell that meant.
Oh, interesting.
I had no idea. It's during the self-destruct sequence at the end. You have to walk into a room where there are a bunch of animals, and then they'll run away. And then when you leave, as you are flying away from the exploding planet Zebes, you see like a small little thing fly off of it, and that's the animals leaving the planet. I did not save the animals when I played. They should have saved themselves. I can't do everything for everyone.
I don't think I did either.
Super Metroid would be re-released several times, but like I said, it's kind of recently that it started getting re-released. So like the earliest re-release that I could find information on was for the Wii Virtual Console. And then there was the Wii U Virtual Console as well. It also came out on new Nintendo 3DS Virtual Console. And it's also one of the games bundled on the SNES Classic. Most recently, it's also available as one of the Super Nintendo games available for those who have Nintendo Switch Online. And that's it. Like, it didn't come out on the Game Boy Advance or anything as far as I can tell. I thought it did, but I couldn't find any evidence that it had. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just looked in the wrong place or just scrolled over it with my brain. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Fusion would be pretty similar to as far as the gameplay. Zero Mission is the remake of the original Metroid. So yeah, I don't think Super Metroid, no.
Interesting. The success of Super Metroid is probably single-handedly why Samus would end up as one of the 12 original playable characters in the original Super Smash Bros. Like, I can't think of anything else that would have done it. I don't think Metroid 2 was what took her to those heights. And her Zero Suit version would become playable in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, with Ridley being made playable in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and also Dark Samus. But Dark Samus isn't from this game, so we're not talking about them.
Finally, Ridley, though. Oh my goodness.
Finally, yes. Ridley had this whole thing where I think it was our friend Fossils who described it, where it was like he's slowly becoming, like, he was slowly getting closer to being playable in every game and yet still not being there. So like in Super Smash Bros., he's flying in the background of the Zebes stage. In Melee, he's in the FMV, the opening FMV. In Brawl, he is a boss. In Wii U, he is a stage hazard that has his own stock icon if you kill the boss. And then in Ultimate, he is finally a playable character. Despite the success of Super Metroid, the Metroid franchise would once again have to wait 8 full years for any other entry into the series, which would come in 2002, a year that saw the release of both Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance and Metroid Prime for the GameCube.
And they were linked, and then you could bring the Fusion suit into Metroid Prime, and its cyan colors look god-awful in that game.
And I haven't played either one.
Oh.
Even though I own Fusion on 3DS, I'm pretty sure. I've never played it, and I just never played any of the Prime games.
Metroid Prime, the original, is a straight classic. The other two, pretty good, but the original, straight classic.
1 and 2 are both... I own Metroid Prime Trilogy on Wii U, and I haven't loaded it up even once. 1 and 2 are on the Smasterpieces list, so I'm going to get to them eventually. So, let's talk about the soundtrack. And that soundtrack was composed by Kenji Yamamoto. Yamamoto was born on April 25th, 1964 in Japan. Couldn't find exactly where, but that's fine. He began working for Nintendo's sound department around 1987, and he seemingly still works there today. His work, as he puts it, generally emphasizes heavy drums, piano, voiced chants, clanging pipes, and electric guitar, which is an odd spread. And that's really all I can find. His Wikipedia page spends more time talking about the games he's worked on more than it does about him, and I don't mean like, he worked on this and this. I mean, he worked on this. Here's a full description of that game. It's bizarrely written, and this seems to be all the information on it. Same with, I couldn't find, like, interviews. It was weird. Granted, he is not to be confused with a different Kenji Yamamoto, who also used to work in the video game industry, and I put emphasis on used to. His main work was with Toei Animation, this Kenji Yamamoto, and that one did music for various Dragon Ball games. And he was the center of a plagiarism controversy that has since basically caused him to be kicked out of the industry, and therefore I genuinely want to emphasize this is not that guy. This is a different Kenji Yamamoto.
You want the Nintendo one.
Yes, you want the Nintendo one, not the one who plagiarized all the music for Budokai Tenkaichi. In terms of discography, he's worked on a ton of stuff, which makes it even weirder that there's no information on him, because his first game for Nintendo was Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! He did the music for Famicom Wars alongside Hip Tanaka. He did Famicom Detective Club 1 and 2. The first game was done also alongside Hip Tanaka, and the second game was done solo. He was sound support on Mario Kart Super Circuit. He is heavily involved in the Metroid series, even now, including doing music for Super Metroid, Metroid Prime, the sound director for Metroid Fusion, Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, Metroid Prime Pinball, Metroid Prime Hunters, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, and Metroid Samus Returns most recently. He was the sound director for Brain Age 2. He did the music for Donkey Kong Country Returns and was a music supervisor on Tropical Freeze. He was sound support on Rhythm Heaven Fever. Did the music for Pilot Wings Resort. Was the sound director for the Street Pass games Monster Manor and Me Force. He was sound support for Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE, and most recently, he did the music for Sushi Striker The Way of Sushido. In terms of Super Smash Bros., for Brawl, he did remixes of the main theme of Metroid and the opening/menu theme from Metroid Prime, and in Wii U 3DS, he did the Donkey Kong Country Returns vocal version, and did not do anything for Ultimate, as far as I can tell.
So he's the one for Samus is under fire. She sent an emergency directive.
That would have been him, yeah. In fact, both of those have weird vocals at the start, and it's his fault. Yeah. Except I kind of like them. I kind of like them in the Metroid Prime menu music. Yeah. I still kind of prefer without them. But yeah, in that main theme, Join the fight. It's so bad. It's really, really bad.
But no, Yamamoto's amazing, and for him to be with the company that long and be involved in so many great projects, I mean, he's a standout there for sure.
Mm-hmm. And he's been doing games as recently as 2018, so he is obviously still trucking along. So in terms of actual, development research for Super Metroid itself, the music in the game was not only done by Yamamoto, but also by Minako Hamano, whom we have talked about. In episode 34, Peter brought her to the table to talk about her work in The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. And actually, Yamamoto seems to work with Hamano a lot. A good chunk of his discography mentions her name as well. So, as the SNES could play sounds on 8 simultaneous channels instead of the paltry 4 for the NES, which the NES really only had 3, because one of those was for sound effects specifically, Yamamoto decided that this would be a good chance to use what he called, quote, rich and expressive sounds in order to portray the setting as best as he could. This included things like a female chorus, which is something that is used to great effect in this soundtrack, I think. And Yamamoto also served as the person in charge of sound effects and sound programming as well, which he claims allowed him greater freedom to make sure both sides of the sound meshed as well as they could. It allowed him to approach it with, quote, a sound programmer's ear, with a sound effect creator's ear, and with the approach, methodology, and theory of a composer.
Yeah, if you're trying to capture the feeling of the Metroid games with the sense of isolation, but pushing forward with adventure, like, you can have triumphant themes, you can have desolate soundscapes, and if you can work in all the different sound effects too, then you're in full control of that whole mood.
Yeah. And he really went to show that he was, indeed, in full control of that whole mood. So let's talk about the full control about that whole mood and also the mood itself by getting into our 5 critical tracks. The first one being the theme of Super Metroid. This is absolutely iconic. It's mainly that bass line, I think, the but it's also the main trumpet melody, I think, is pretty iconic as well. This is probably the most recognizably Metroid song in the series, I feel like, especially that bass line. There are others that very easily, like, stand up to it, but I think when you think Metroid, that bass line is usually one of the first things that probably comes to mind.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a classic theme, and yeah, even there's the triumphant sort of horn there. But yeah, you're right, the bass line. I've got it in my head right now, honestly.
Yamamoto apparently came up with this song by humming while riding his motorcycle home after work. So there's another connection between the two games.
Could these games get any more similar?
Like, this is honestly kind of freaking me out how many parallels we've been able to draw between these two soundtracks. But our second critical track is Green Brinstar. So this song is also known as Brinstar Overgrown with Vegetation Area. And I'll be honest, when I started playing Super Metroid, I did not expect to hear this sort of jungly theme. But hot damn, it really pays off. Like, those synth vocals really, really make it. And just the really catchy beats, especially the intro where it's like, you're riding down the elevator and the music just slowly fades in.
Yeah.
It's so cool, and I honestly think this might be my favorite song in the game.
I'm right there with you, honestly. I feel like number 5 here on your critical tracks is always going to top it for me, but this is 1B, or like really close number 2. Because this is fantastic. Like, really cool rhythm, sort of melodies they have going on here. I also hear this song sometimes paired up in different mashups. Like, I feel like there's like a Justin Timberlake song that this is paired with.
Where's the ROM hack that puts Justin Timberlake as a boss? That's what I want to know. But yeah, it's just, this song is not anything like any song I expected to hear when playing this game, and it fits perfectly. And like I mentioned, it's I think it's almost entirely because of the like vocals, the It's so good.
God, I love this song. Great pick.
So good. Such a good groove to it. Critical track number 3 is the theme of Samus Aran, Space Warrior. This song plays when you return to your ship for the first time during your adventure. Basically, you pop out onto the overworld on the other side of the map at some point. And once you've done that, then this song starts playing in that area. And Samus' ship is like a very, very important area, obviously. First of all, it's her ship. It's how she got there. But it's the only save point in the game that also heals you and replenishes all your supplies. So it's like a place you want to be, and you want to be there very often. When you're not at Samus' ship, you should be asking, where's Samus' ship? Something that bothers me, actually, is that Smash has a different song called Theme of Samus Aran, Space Warrior.
Or Galactic Warrior or whatever, yeah.
And it is a remix of a different song. It is not this song. In fact, it is a Super Metroid song, and we will talk about it later, but it's not this one. And that bothers me immensely. Granted, this song is very, very good. It's really got this triumphant air to it. Like, this song is telling you, you're doing it. You are making progress. You're awesome. You're doing great. Keep on going. I love it.
Yeah, definitely had to be here. It's a really good pick. And yeah, you're right. Triumphant is absolutely right.
After that, critical track number 4 is Norfair, Ancient Ruins. This makes for terrible audio, but I don't care. This is the song that plays as you are making your way towards Ridley, and it is incredibly tense. Like, it just keeps, if I might quote our friend Matt, it just keeps building and building and building and building, and it never really seems to release any of that tension. It's just constantly building up until you finally hit Ridley. Ba, 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 ba. It's so good. And then when you get to Ridley, it just stops. And then, of course, some different music starts playing, but like, it's those heavy drums. It's the trumpets in the background. It's so good. This is a great song.
Coming from Metroid Prime and hearing this theme originally in Magmore Caverns in that game, another lava-filled area, coming back to hear the original version, of course, both by Kenji Yamamoto. Great to hear this rendition in this 16-bit with the different instruments. A very welcome theme to have coming back to Super Metroid.
Mm-hmm. It's, I think, maybe one of my, like, it doesn't beat out Green Brinstar, but I think it's one of my favorite area themes.
And it's super good with, like, that heavy, isolating, but also oppressing mood.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the most oppressive song in the game, actually, honestly.
Yeah.
And from there, we move directly in to our 5th critical track, and there can be no other one than Big Boss Confrontation 1. Kind of an anticlimactic title, but it's fine. This song was composed by Minako Hamano, and it is another one of, if not among the most iconic themes to come out of this game. It plays during the boss fights with Dragon, and most importantly, because it's basically become his theme, Ridley. And this song has just been made even better by modern remixes, a lot of them turning it into this heavy rock piece, Smash especially. Or like Metroid Prime with the versus Meta Ridley, that turns it sort of into this sort of tense, more kind of subdued electronics. I don't know really how to describe Meta Ridley, but like it's also a really, really good rendition of this song. And this is like, I had to go look up which other boss this played for because Ridley was the only one I could think of. And I knew it played somewhere else, but yeah, this is Ridley's song here.
Yeah. Cause there's another piece where it's like with basically all the other ones, Kraid and all of those other ones. But yeah, this is the Ridley theme. We mentioned in the episode with Minako Hamano, for Link's Awakening, just what it's like, she did the Ridley battle theme. And just so amazed then. But yeah, it's still so good. My favorite. I mean, such a classic. Has been used for all those amazing versions of the song. But the roots here, fantastic.
Yeah, and just that boss is so hard.
Oh my god, it is. Oh,
that is by far the hardest boss in the game.
Oh man, I had to look up like a YouTube video to see how I could cheese it out. Because trying to take Ridley on naturally is not fair.
I'm pretty sure it took me half an hour to 45 minutes on his own to beat him. He's really, really hard.
God, yeah. And by the end, like the rest of it is smooth sailing by comparison.
Even Mother Brain's not nearly as hard as Ridley is.
God, no.
Anyways, we have Cutting Room Floor tracks. Both of us have two. Peter, hit me with yours first.
I'm going to go back to Brinstar, but we're going to go Red Brinstar. So this is also known as Brinstar Red Soil Swampy Area. Very, very descriptive. But this is such a haunting theme. But there's like this reverence and wonder to it. And I think it's just so good. Like starts really, quiet with these, low notes coming in. And then you get the choir, the continued female choir. Na, 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 na. But I think it's extra cool when the piano comes in later in the piece. The da 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 dun 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 dun. Like, oh man. Another example of just perfect Super Metroid music.
I agree. This song, Haunting, is a very, very good descriptor of it. It has that very isolated, subdued feeling to it. And just another example of like Yamamoto kicked the crap out of the atmosphere in this game. Very, very good.
But I think if we're continuing to talk about like boss battle themes, we mentioned Mother Brain, so Mother Brain. Continuing the trend of those boss battle theme compositions. This is composed by Minako Hamano. And we go from like desolate, isolating, haunting to just shattering and like ear piercing. You get the strong simple bass line of ba 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 ba, but like holy crap, those high pitched chords are so jarring when you're taking on this behemoth of a beast that is Mother Brain, especially like with that final part. I mean, holy cow, that is like scary, unnerving. So you get the dun 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 for Ridley's theme, but then it's just like, no, this is good final boss music. Absolutely, Mother Brain. Well done to Hamano.
See, half of me doesn't like this song because it sounds like that. But at the same time, like when I think about it, it's like, of course it sounds like that. It sounds perfect for Mother Brain. Like this song is actually perfect at what it's supposed to be. And in that way, I think I agree that it has a very good spot on the cutting room floor. For me, I have two songs as well. The first being Norfair, Hot Lava. This song just feels sinister.
Ooh, yeah, another good word for it, yeah.
As if the world around you is actually the true enemy. And if you walk into this area without the right suit, it is. Because you just start dying. But like, yeah, this song just has a creepy, sinister feeling to it. And I really, really like it.
Yeah, there's not much to it, but there's enough there to kind of put you on edge. And yeah, you're right. You want to drop that health down real quick and to die quickly. Yeah, that'll do it.
Mm-hmm. After that, my other song on the cutting room floor is Ending. This was composed by Minako Hamano, and it's just in general like this super triumphant piece. This is the song that Smash remixes and gives the title Theme of Samus Aran. So I guess this one's actually her theme? I don't know. Sure, it's a good song. I like it.
It is definitely very representative of like, you cleared the adventure, you beat the game, and I think it's suiting for an ending theme.
Yeah. So what will I never forget about Super Metroid? Honestly, I think this is another one of those retro games that I think aged perfectly. And in my opinion, that's incredibly rare. I think Chrono Trigger is basically one of the only games I can think of that I also say that about. A lot of it is just like the design is impeccable. The map is interesting to explore. The atmosphere is just masterfully crafted. And you know me, I'm a sucker for really good atmosphere. That's why I like horror games. That's why I like good horror games. I should qualify that. If I didn't know that Metroid Prime is also considered like in the same sort of echelon as Super Metroid, maybe not entirely the exact same tier, but it's certainly very close in terms of how it's regarded. I would say that Super Metroid is lightning in a bottle that was never going to be captured again. And I'm sure that's how the designers felt too when the game came out. And then maybe that's why it took 8 years to get another Metroid game. It was actually probably because the game didn't sell well in Japan. But I like my theory better.
This is a very special game, especially if you are like me and you only played and learned Metroid on the Prime series, but you haven't gone back to play Super Metroid, I think it's really worthy of making that effort to go back and try it and play it, and maybe you'll enjoy it and beat it. I think it's absolutely worth that. But that will do it for this week on a week where there are two just very similar games from entirely different franchises, but I mean, my gosh.
Entirely different companies.
The ARM cannons on Super Nintendo with composers named Yamamoto
who both rode bikes.
They rode bikes and got inspirations for some of the main themes from their games. I mean, my goodness. Mega Man X, Super Metroid. That will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at the Dobaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur over at anondino.squarespace.com. Also the home of Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces. But to find that MP3 podcast version, just go on your favorite podcast service of choice. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, podcast storefronts all around the globe. Take it with you on a run, at work, in your car. And when you're at work, we won't tell your boss that you're listening to conversations about great video game music. Also, we are on Spotify for our podcast feeds, but we also have a Spotify playlist that whenever we talk about a song on the show that's on Spotify, we're adding it to that playlist. Any additions this week, Joe?
Mega Man X is on there because Capcom has been very good at basically getting pretty much all of their soundtracks on there, even for games that did not come out in America, complete with the bad translations of all of the boss names.
Icy Penguigo.
extra bonus right there. But unsurprisingly, Super Metroid, being a first-party Nintendo game, is not on Spotify.
That's a bummer. Hopefully some bonus tracks coming soon as well. Still working on those. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Evelyn Fisher.
I will be talking about Sam Hulick. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
Well, you'll be happy with this because I ended up looking for, well, I wasn't specifically looking for it, but I ended up picking a cover of a song that is on Your Cutting Room Floor, being the Red Brinstar theme. This video calls it Lower Brinstar. It is by Michelle Heafy on YouTube. And it's just, she puts her own vocals to it, which make it double haunting. And it's a very, very good cover. So please enjoy that. Bye.
Thank you very much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.